talking about the different clubs, and there's certain clubs in the United States that aren't necessarily well known that a lot of comics work their stuff out. And one of them is the Comedy Attic in Bloomington, Indiana. So if you look at the Comedy Attic, who goes there? Mark Maron always does his stuff there
Cool.
first.
Yeah.
Stuart Huff always does his stuff there. I think Mulaney. I think Mulaney has done that room quite a few times. And I talk to comedians who either are from Indy or they're from Bloomington, that area, that get to do that room a lot, and they say that that room just fosters artistry, and it's a true comedy room. You know how you go to listening rooms for music and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's a true comedy incubator, and that's funny because that's how I felt in Muscle Shoals studio. It's just like the
Cool.
music was there.
Today on the show, we are joined with comedian and founder, creator of the Behind the Bits podcast, Scott Curtis. Scott's got such an incredible podcasting journey, and it was so cool to pick his brain about it and what makes him so passionate about the comedy scene. We talk about so many things from the art of stand-up and podcast production. I absolutely love this one, and we go so deep as the conversation goes on, from community building, from like different vibes in different rooms, from the trials and tribulations of producing an ongoing podcast. You're going to hear about some of the things I go through and never tell you. But it was cool to interview a fellow podcaster, which we rarely do on this show. It's like right when we started, I felt like we had this connection. Like we're part of the same gang, you know? And this was just an overall really fun and introspective episode. Right when it was over, it made me want to even work harder on this shit. You know what I'm saying? And I hope we can pass those vibes off to you for whatever you're doing in life, whatever your passion is. And let us know after listening to this episode if you feel that way. And also give the Behind the Bits podcast a follow if you're into all things that are comedy. Such a dope platform that Scott made, and we're gonna get into that story right now.
We're here, and it's cool to meet you, man. And
Yeah, nice to meet you.
yeah, it's I checked out the podcast. It's super interesting and just totally awesome. And I kind of want to know like what inspired you to fully jump into a comedy podcast.
Well, it's kind of a long story. I was always a comedy fan, and I dug some of the old ones like Tom Dreesen, Jeff Altman, who I just interviewed for the podcast. It's not out yet, and Steve Martin, Dave Letterman, those guys. And I really enjoyed it. I always watch comedy. I was like the class clown in school,
Mhm.
and I just ended up being a regular guy. Got married, had kids, and didn't ever pursue anything comedy wise. And then at age 52, I the place I worked, I had been there for like, I don't know, 14, 15 years at that point, said that they wanted me to entertain the Christmas party, wanted me to do comedy. So I got up and I did it and roasted everybody, and that was fine,
That's
and
awesome.
but then I got kind of bit because I actually wrote a couple jokes for it, and so I went to a couple open mics and started doing comedy kind of on the regular, and produced a few shows, and then I started the podcast. It's been about a year and a half ago, and I started that mainly because first off, I see a lot of people older, some gray hairs getting into comedy. And second off, I had listened to a lot of comedy podcasts when I started doing this, and none of them were perfect to me.
Mhm.
And sometimes there was a lot of small talk, there was a lot of inside jokes and stuff like that. I wanted to get right down to the nitty gritty and talk about comedy. So I said, let's do it. And I put some planning into it and made it happen.
That's awesome. And you're 85 episodes deep. I got to congratulate you on that because keeping a podcast running is a lot of work. And I get a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
people who hit me up asking for advice in doing it. And I notice the majority, maybe they'll do 2 or 3 episodes, and then I never see this podcast again.
Yeah.
So every time I see somebody get past like the 20 benchmark, I'm like, yeah, you're doing it. You're like,
Yeah.
the thick and the weeds and everything. But how's that experience been like since it was like the inception of the idea to now fully doing it like over 80 episodes in?
Yeah, I really put a lot of thought into this, which is something I don't normally do. I'm kind of ADD, and I just kind of like to jump into stuff and not really plan a whole lot. So I actually planned for several months before I started it because I wanted to be serious about it and I wanted to do it right. And the catalyst that really got my motor running was the fact that I got Tom Dreesen, my first comic, the guy that I used to watch on the Mike Douglas show and Johnny Carson and Letterman and all that. I got him to be my first guest. And,
oh, amazing.
And you know, if you listen to that interview, I am just like stupid. I'm, you know, I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. You know, I threw a few softballs at Tom and just let him talk. So that was good. The nice thing was about that episode was that he had just been on Mark Maron's podcast, WTF, just a few weeks before I did that interview. And I got him to say stuff that he didn't say on Maron's podcast. That's what I was going for. So
nice.
He's kind of got a line. He's kind of got a shtick that he does for interviews and stuff like that. And I was able to get him out of that. And, you know, from there, I just started hitting up people I knew from comedy. And also I just put myself out there and asked, you know, people I never thought I'd get. And I don't feel like, you know, when I go back to my interviews, I think I've probably gotten to be a little bit better of an interviewer. And I am trying not to say so much, but damn, it's hard.
It's all good. My word is like when I'm thinking, that's my thinking word. So yours is
yeah.
And then I'll listen back and I'll just be like, oh shit, I say that way too much.
Yeah. But you know what it's morphed into is not only is it a podcast, but I have made friends and I've also made connections. I've been able to say, hey, you look like you'd be a perfect fit for this club in this area. Oh, you're moving to New York. I know these people. Maybe they can get you going. And I've made connections. And the funny thing is I see them interacting like on social media and stuff like that. And I know that I made that. And that's really what I'm most proud of, is the fact that I've been able to be like a old matchmaker or something like that, but not for sex or marriage, more for professional stuff. And that's really cool. That's really, that's my biggest takeaway from it.
Yeah, I get a similar type of I don't know, just joy out of things like that too, with doing my series as well. So I totally understand. And it's almost, it felt like when I started the podcast, it was going to be kind of like a little selfish promotion thing, but then it turned into where I fell more in love with telling all these unknown stories. And then, like you mentioned, like people start connecting, and it, from the power of like telling these stories, it builds a community around it too. And it sounds like you're seeing that. Definitely.
Yeah, it's really, really nice. And it's funny, you know, I notice things like the artwork for your podcast and the artwork for my podcast. So many podcasts have the picture of the host on there, and you know that podcast is about them. Even if they interview people, they're going to make it about them. And I was very purposeful in not putting my picture anywhere in any of the stuff, because it's not me, it's them. And you know, I always look, and you know, if I've talked more than like 25% of the time in an interview, then I know that I didn't do it right. And so it's nice to see those little bars, you know.
Definitely. And I feel the same way. And maybe at the beginning, it's I felt like with the podcast I was consuming, I thought I had to talk a lot about it. So even when people like go back and want to check out my podcast, I'm like, oh, don't listen till like episode 50, because that's when, I don't know, after time, and as you know from doing it so long, you just because you grow that interviewer like muscle memory in a way where
Yeah.
you just, and like you mentioned, I thought you it was super cool how you mentioned your first episode, you made sure you kind of set up where your guest was doing all the talking. And
Yeah.
also what was great, like you listened to them on another show, like such as Mark Maron, and was consciously thinking, I'm going to get something into this interview that we haven't heard before. Cause yeah, I just think that's an awesome approach.
Yeah, yeah, and I've really enjoyed the people I've met. Even, I I really connect with some of them, and some of them I do the interview and then never really think about them again. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you're the same way. It's just it's funny how it's just like in life, that's the way it is. But I enjoy seeing them. A few of them have really done well since we talked last year, and some of them are probably getting ready to blow up. And I talked to them way back when. So I
Yeah,
think
that's the
that's
coolest. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's super cool. I also did kind of a companion piece because I like to be wacky and nutty, and I did a companion piece called the BTB Internet Talk Show, which was nothing like my podcast. It was a video thing, and I'd have anywhere between 3 and 5 guests on, and Dean Martin would show up, and I had a whole story behind it, and it was really kind of
Cool.
improv-y. I would tell him, hey, I'm going to ask you these 2 questions, and you can formulate an answer if you want, or just do it on the spot. And then we'd do that. We'd give them a chance to either do 5 minutes of comedy or a rant or whatever they want to do. And then Dean Martin would show up, and then all hell would break loose. So that was a lot of fun, and a lot of the connections I made was through that, because I'd have my podcast guests on this and get them all together, and it made the connection. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun, especially just being loose and riffing, and like you're building something with people, but also like just knowing it's gonna be super silly and it can go in any direction. That's totally awesome. And that's one thing I've tried stand up a few times as well, and I've never done the improv thing, and I think I'm just way too frightened to like, I don't know, it's almost the fear of the unknown, type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, I'm from Northern Indiana, and one of my good friends there would put on shows that were a mix of improv and stand up. So he'd have 2 or 3 stand ups, and then he'd have a couple improv troops that would come in and do things. It would be like, 10, 15 minutes each way. And he always was trying to get me to join in on the improv stuff, and I was just like, I don't know what the hell to do. So
Yeah.
I don't even know what to do with my hands. So just dance around me, do whatever the hell you want, and I will just stand here and sweat. And but when I did the show, I started understanding what all this yes and shit is, and all that kind of stuff, and I was able to be a little bit more in the moment, and that did help me with my stand up too, because I used to be really particular about my set. I'm going to do these 4 bits, and it's going to last this long, and I'm going to say these exact words. And after I started getting to that a little bit more, I was just like, okay, I'm going to go up with a couple premises and see what happens. And
That's
it's
really
it,
cool.
it's been really good. Yeah.
Yeah. It's cool to hear like kind of like your evolution, even like beside the podcast and in your comedy world as well too. And I think you mentioned to me in a message you're from Alabama, right?
Yeah, I'm actually, so I've only been in Alabama for, how long have we been here? I think 6 months. And the last 50, most of the last 57 years were actually in Indiana, Northern Indiana.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my son lives down here. So we wanted to be by one kid, and the other one lives in DC, and I don't even want to try that. So
Yeah.
we came down here.
Yeah, that's cool. And is there much of a comedy scene in Alabama as well?
Yeah, it looks like there is. So I've been to a few. I mean, you can do open mics Sunday through Wednesday, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's not LA, it's not New York, it's not Toronto, but it's it's not bad for a pretty small market. And I met some pretty cool people. I did a show a couple weekends ago and totally pretty much sucked at it because I hadn't been on stage for so long. But it is what it is. And but it looks like it's at least as big as the Northern Indiana scene I came from, and they had Chicago to work off of too.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it seems like you're just a very creative guy, like you mentioned with how you did like that little spin-off with your show and stuff. Would you ever think of like kind of bringing a live type of performance with like maybe some of your own comedic ideas?
Yeah, I don't know. It's
It's a lot of work, but
it is.
yeah.
Yeah, I at this point in my life, I'm up for just about anything. So if anybody said, "Hey, you want to do this play? You want to do Death of a Salesman or something like that?" I'd say, "Yeah, yeah, why not?"
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And yeah, it's I noticed like on my podcasting journey, just through all the time and like listening back to while you're editing and stuff, I felt like I've learned a lot and grew within myself too. Is there any like key things that I don't know, maybe popped off as you're going back and listening to like older episodes that you didn't know you did, or like seen any input or like specific growth throughout the journey?
Yeah, and it kind of bled into my life too, because you can, I mean, you can tell on a podcast when somebody is asking a list of questions. And in some of my episodes, I had a list of questions. And that means if you got that list of questions, you are basically listening for the person to stop talking and you ask the next question. You don't really do any active listening.
Mhm.
And so I noticed that, when you're pretty critical of yourself and you listen back to your episode, and I noticed that and I said, okay, well, I'm going to put a few bullet points up and I'm going to really lean into this listening thing and make sure that I know what this person is passionate about. This is the part of comedy they really want to talk about. They want to talk about the writing, they want to talk about venues, they want to talk about the business side. You can really if you active listen, then you get those cues and then lean into that. And then I got better at it. But the funny thing about that is and you know this because you've been podcasting, is you sometimes get out of that, and because you didn't do enough research, so you have to be more regimented or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you can blow out of it and blow back into it if you recognize it. But and how that spun into my life is I became a better listener. And
Yeah.
when I talk to people, I don't talk as much, I listen more, and it's really helped.
Yeah, that's really cool. You probably like unconsciously while you're in a conversation, after they say something, ask a follow-up question that leads them to talking even more. And
Yeah.
I noticed that's been happening with me, like unconsciously too, just because this is how many hours we spent doing this style of conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I had Larry Hankin on. He was a two-parter because we talked for 3 hours,
Ah, amazing.
and we talked for like a half hour after we were done recording. And he's like, "How long we been talking?" And I said, "A
Yeah,
long
and
time."
probably it felt like 15 minutes, when you
Yeah,
click with somebody.
yeah, yeah. And it was really cool. And I got a lot of great knowledge out of it. And Larry's a really cool guy.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you happen to have like a favorite episode or a favorite guest? I know your first one was very special to you, but
Yeah,
anything else? Yeah.
yeah, Dreesen will always be my favorite. I got to talk to a newer sensation, Corey Ryan Forrester. He blew up really during the pandemic because of all the videos he did, the Buttercream Dream and stuff like that. And I went through his I think it was Twitter or Instagram or something like that. And I just sent him a message and I said, I'm really tired of fucking around with publicists. Can you just do my podcast? So
Nice.
he said, he said, yeah, I can do it. And his publicist emails me then.
Yeah. Here's the
and
times.
yeah,
Yeah.
and gets everything scheduled. But the nice thing about that was he'd done quite a few podcasts during the pandemic, but he just all he talked about was these videos that he were doing, and he wanted to talk about stand up, and I let him talk about stand up, so we hit it off really well. And that's one of my favorites as far as recent times. Ian Bagg was another one that was a really good one. And the funny thing is Michael Palisak was right before him, and both of those were two comedians that I really enjoy. And Michael's from the Indiana slash Illinois area, and Ian is just a nut. I've always loved his crowd work and stuff. So both of them back to back was pretty cool too.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And yeah, I love hearing that throughout your journey to you're getting to meet all these people that you're practically like a fan of too. And even on my podcast journey too, it's crazy, like the magic of just starting to do quality interviews for a certain type of scene or different kind of arts. And then you mentioned publicists that I don't usually talk about, like behind the scenes stuff on my show.
Yeah.
But it's amazing when sometimes you'll get an email and it's like, hey, can you talk to this guy? And it's like, oh my God, I'm a fan of this person. You like,
Yeah.
yes, like those are the best days. And I'm sure you've had a bunch of them from doing the comedy podcast.
Yeah, I have had a few, and probably like you, I've had quite a few approach me that are just nowhere near ready to be on the podcast, or nothing that you would ever want to have on. I had a guy just this week email me and said that he used to be a comedy booker, and I like to talk to the business people too, but looking at all the stuff he's done after it, he is like the most misogynistic dude I've ever seen. And I'm like,
Oh,
I'm
fuck.
not gonna give this guy space. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've had a few come to me, and I've really appreciated. And John Poveromo, his publicist, came to me about a year ago or so, and he's one of the guys I really hit it off with, and we still talk, and I would just really enjoy what he does. And where was I going? The publicist and stuff
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
we were just kind of like talking about like making those connections that maybe like you wouldn't think you'd make, like maybe when you started doing this, and then it kind of just growing to that, and next thing you know they're asking you to interview these people who you're fans of and stuff like that. But yeah, also like you mentioned, like it's cool to hear you're very selective of, like, I don't know, taking care of your brand, not wanting to put on somebody who, like you mentioned, you did your research and notice, oh, like this guy like hates women or something like that. You don't want to promote that. And
yeah. And one of the other things about my podcast that I think is important, I do want to talk to famous people. We all want to talk to famous people, but what the core of my podcast is people who are working as comedians. You don't have to be famous. You just have to be making at least part of your living doing it. And your advice is probably going to be a little bit better than somebody who's been famous for a long time and doesn't even remember what the digging in the trenches is like that. So I make a point to make sure that I am getting comedians on that aren't necessarily famous, but they are working at it and doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds like such an awesome platform, and especially for you to see, like, oh, this person's taking it seriously. They're making this a part of my life. I'm going to give them this gift to share their story. And I think that's just awesome, man.
Yeah. And I would love to expand it to just to beyond comedy, but I can't do that to my brand. So I'm almost ready to start another podcast because I love music, and I've listened to a few of your episodes. I mean, you have the Creeping Death dude on there, and I was like, oh yeah, I know.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I want to talk to more people that are in different areas too, but I don't know if I got it in me to start another one because this is a lot of work.
Yeah, I interestingly, like, I had a similar thing, but I wasn't doing my own podcast, but I started off doing media for a bunch of websites, and it was only music. And I had that scene in my brain, or like that seed in my brain where I'm like, I need to just talk to everybody, like arts and
Yeah.
entertainment. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like you mentioned, it's like a lot of work, and it's like to start over with something. But again, like putting that one step in the shallow end, and
Yeah.
it eventually will snowball.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I always say the first step is always like the hardest, especially when you're like comfortable. And it sounds like you just have this awesome brand with the comedy thing, and like you're obviously busy. You're at episode 85 too, so it's
Yeah.
almost I'm sure it's like, oh, where I'm gonna find the time to do this other thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know people who do multiple podcasts, but I feel like in my case, you know, that would take up enough time that Behind the Bits wouldn't be as good. So, and one of them would suffer, or they'd both suffer. So, yeah, I'll let somebody else do it. I'll listen to your show.
Yeah, thanks. Let me know if there's anybody you want to talk to or want me to talk to. I'll reach out. You can vicariously, like,
Yeah,
I'll do the work for you, Scott. Yeah, but that's so cool. And yeah, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I also wanted to ask, like, on your journey, what did you find like the most challenging thing in doing a podcast?
uh, I think all the technical shit is really what gets me, and the editing, and not knowing your gain on your mic was so high when you recorded, you got fuzz and you don't know how to get rid of it and stuff like that. So that's what I hate the most about it. And I'm almost to the point to hire an editor and just let them do it. And I'm almost there, because that's the worst part. So that's a big hurdle. I didn't necessarily, everybody worries about listenership, and I've never really worried about it. And so it grew on its own. And I won an award last year from Discover Pods, and that kind of catapulted me.
Congratulations.
But thank you. And that all happened, and then so my listenership exploded, and now I've got like real sponsors talking to me. So now I'm actually trying to promote myself again.
Yeah.
Because I was just letting it ride.
Yeah.
And now I just want to make sure that they see steadily rising numbers, so they know that they're spending their money right.
Yeah. But that's kind of beautiful. Like it really shows that you love what you're doing and you're about the content and everything. Because I've talked to some people, they're like, oh, I'm gonna start a podcast, and they haven't even done one episode yet, and they're looking for sponsors and blah blah. And it's like almost like it's not about the content, it's about like they think it's like a quick cash grab type thing. And I feel like that only works if you already have a following or you're a celebrity or whatever. But I don't know, I feel like people see podcasts and think, oh, they're only talking, I can do that. And which you can, but like you mentioned, the technicality behind it is like such an eye-opener, and just hours beyond the conversation that go into it, and even setting things up, meeting new people, and to keep the content going and stuff like that. So people can do one or two, but then it gets like, I don't know, I'm impressed after somebody does like 10 or 11.
Oh yeah. And those first 10 or 11 are so hard, because you want it to be perfect, and you're over editing, and it's just I pretty much throw mine up the way they are now, just because if I hear myself say enough times, then I will finally stop doing it.
I relate to that so much. I only pretty much do a cut if a guest asks me, hey, I shouldn't have said that, can you take that out? I'm like, yeah, sure. And then I'll find the beginning, I'll find the end, snip, and I try my best in the middle. And I guess this is what kind of makes it a little bit of connecting to stand up and improv. You're trying to like keep it flowing with the questions and all that too. So that's something maybe I just learned right now, like just talking to you. So
it's the technical part aside, and trying to get listeners and all that kind of stuff. The as you know, one of the really hard things is to get those guests that you want. And and I've got a lot of people who want to do the show, and we just can't connect. And I've got a few that we've been playing tag for a year,
Yeah.
and so you want to make sure you're getting good guests for the show. And that's really that's almost half the job, is making sure that you've got enough stuff in the can that you can put an episode out when you want to.
Yeah, that's very true. And you're always like thinking ahead too. And even like after we're done this one, I'm gonna be going down my Rolodex and like, so who can we get next? And it's part of that's like the fun and stress with it. I don't know. I kind of like that social aspect of meeting a lot of new people here and there, and almost the strategic planning and everything.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's like right time, right place. I worked in sales a lot, and the old adage is harder you work, the luckier you get. So you got to work really hard to get these people, and someday Dave Letterman is gonna have enough time to talk to me. So
Yeah. Have you ever had the experience where you get a bigger guest and maybe like you're working your day job or whatever, and you get this email and I had this once where it's like, oh, they can talk to you tomorrow. And I'm just telling my boss, I'm like, I'm not in. Like,
yeah,
like part of my mind's like, oh, do I just pretend I'm sick, or I'm gonna tell them as they don't really know about the podcast? Like, I used to live like more people like now, like in the past 2 years, know about this podcast. But at the beginning, I was almost like I was living a double life, like Batman at night, doing these fucking interviews and working my day job. And, but then it started like overlapping in weird ways. But have you ever had that where it's like you got an opportunity and it's like, okay, I need to stop everything I had in my planned my life the next day to just like take this moment because it might never come again,
Yeah, it actually just happened, and the
Right
episode's not even out yet. It was Jeff Altman, because I had emailed him, and he said, yeah, let's do it, and we had scheduled it, and then something came up and he couldn't do it. And then he was talking about, because he works full-time as a magician now, and
Oh, wow.
he was going to magic conventions and stuff like that. And he was cool enough to call me and say, hey, I'm home this Friday. Do you want to do it Friday? And that was on Thursday. And
Yeah.
it was like, I think he wanted to do it at like 2 in the afternoon or something like that. And I pretty much work from home anyway. So
Yeah, right on.
I said, yeah, I will mark myself away for an hour and talk to you. So yeah, that just happened.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's almost like it's funny with when it comes to like the bigger guests who don't have time. It's almost like being on call like a firefighter. It's like you don't know when it's gonna happen, but if it happens, it's just like sound the alarm, I'm ready, type of moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a few that no matter what, if I had to drive home really quick and get everything up, I would make it happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that just shows like your love for what you're doing right now, and that it's really awesome to hear. And also like on the other side of like beyond the podcasting, your love for comedy too. You mentioned you did like a little thing for work and it kind of got the bite of stand-up.
Yeah.
Just was it the feeling of getting the laughs from people that kind of hit you, or was it just I can do this type of epiphany? Or
yeah, it was almost like nostalgia, because I hadn't really paid a whole bunch of attention to stand-up comedy, while raising kids and stuff like that. And I got up there and scared to death. I mean, I do public speaking. I did webinars and lunch and learns and shit like that all my life. So I'm not afraid of public speaking. What I was afraid of was not being funny. And I got up there and actually got some laughs, and roasted all the right people and said all the right stuff. And the laughter and just appreciating what stand-up comedy is, again, both of those things were like, I wanted to do it. And I'm an attention whore. So whatever I can do to get that, and comedy is certainly one of those ways.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to know, it's like, okay, so you had that, you got the bug, you're like, I want to do this. What was the first step? Did you go to an open mic? Did you hear about something? Did you reach out to somebody?
Yeah, there was a open mic at a coffee shop, and I think they did it on Monday nights, and I signed up for that, and I went, and there were three comedians sitting at a four-seat table, and I just pulled the seat out and said, "Hi, I'm Scott. I'm doing the open mic. Are you guys doing?" And they all looked at me like, "What?" I mean, two of them were much younger than me, and one of them was my age, but they were like, and because comedians tend to be a little bit more standoffish and sit in the corner when they're not performing, and so I
Yeah.
introduced myself, and all three of them are still friends of mine, and
Oh, amazing.
and I did my set, and it wasn't that great. It wasn't terrible. My wife would come with me to a lot of the open mics, and the only question I'd ask her at the end of it was I the worst? And I was never the worst. And a couple times she said she thought I was the best. And
Nice.
she's not she's not she doesn't bullshit. So I
Yeah,
when
this is a good.
she's not going to do it just because I'm her husband. But yeah, so she said, you're getting pretty good at it. So, from there you know I just kept writing and doing open mics, and then I saw the chance to put on some shows because I had a friend that had a rock bar and wasn't doing anything Thursday nights between 8 and 10, and so I scheduled a few shows there. It was kind of a cool experience. Not I think the most people we got in for the show was, I think my biggest crowd was 35. So
That's good. That's
yeah,
good.
not big crowds, but I was able to actually do a showcase where I got everybody who wanted to be on stage to do 10 minutes, and I instead of paying them, I had a professional videographer video their 10 minutes so they'd have something to send to bookers.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
that was my gift to them, and that was the one where 35 people came. So that,
Oh, nice. So I got the laughter in there. It's
yeah,
good.
so that one turned out pretty well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the handful of times I've done it too, it's like I've done some small rooms with like 10 people to 15, and then I've done like a bigger room.
Mhm.
But it's funny, like the only time I've done like a big room, there was like, and big for me was close to like 50 people, but there was such an open space. Like the laughter didn't seem as like
Yeah.
forceful,
Yeah.
but I swear when I was doing this room with like 10 people, it felt like I was in an arena, like just
Yeah.
getting blasted like with
Yeah.
the acoustics and stuff. So
Yeah, and
some of
that's
those small shows are awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
And really the more intimate type of setting, and that's why real comedy clubs have a low ceiling, and they're dark, and they have the brick wall because of the Comedy Store, and that's what they do, and that's the best place for comedy. Now, you can't always do that. So if you're doing it at the Eagles Lodge, or you're doing it at a rock bar like what you
Yeah,
talked
or
about,
some
where it's just
Legion or something.
giant ceilings, and they're not sitting too close to you, that has an effect not only on how they uh, perceive you, but laughter is one of those things that catches. So if they can't hear each other laugh, then the laughs aren't going to be as big. So
Yeah,
and
true.
you just have to know that. It's funny, one of my favorite episodes was with Todd Glass, and we actually talked about how to set up a comedy room more than we talked about anything else. So that's a really
Oh,
good episode if
cool.
you want to know what a room should be like.
Yeah, I'm just totally like interested in like just like nitty gritties of like all art forms and like things you don't usually hear. Like, so
Yeah.
that's really cool. And I'm definitely going to check out that episode as well.
Yeah, and that's some of the stuff I've learned from the podcast. So many comedians, I ask them about, what's a perfect venue like, and things like that. So, and as far as writing and material and delivery, everybody's different. But when you talk about the perfect room, everybody's the same. And
Yeah.
they all agree that a comedy room is much better than a gymnasium or Joe's bar or whatever. You know, it's an actual comedy room is the best place for them to work out material, and that's where they feel most at home.
Yeah, definitely. And I see like all these like the biggest ones they're doing like the Madison Square Gardens and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I can't even imagine what that would feel like. And they
Yeah.
usually have the stage in the center of the arena and there's people behind you or like
Yeah.
that's like I don't even know. Like
Yeah,
I,
and the way they set up arenas is important too. It's funny, I mentioned this in one of my episodes. I don't know if it's come out yet, but I saw a comedian in Indianapolis that I like so much. I'm not going to mention his name because I can't. The second show wasn't as good as as the first. But saw him in Indianapolis, sold out show, bigger room. It was probably I want to say he probably had 2 or 3 thousand people, and so it was one of those bigger auditorium type things, and he just killed. I mean, I just absolutely loved it. So he came to South Bend where I lived and doing the same show, and I told my wife I really want to see it again, so we went to see it. South Bend was totally different, and the rest of the audience probably didn't know, but it wasn't sold out, and there was some sound system issues and stuff like that, and the energy was just not the same. He
Mm.
told all the same jokes and he told them all the same way, but the energy was not nearly as good as that one in Indy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've seen that with bands too, playing big stages, and then I saw that same band a year before in a shitty bar, and it was
Yeah.
like way better. Like just like whether it's just the people together and like the again like low ceiling, all that.
Yeah.
There's so many different factors in that,
Yeah.
and they could do
And
the
this,
exact same thing, but it's just different,
yeah,
like.
yeah. And it was the funny thing is it was a similar sized room,
Mm.
but it was just different.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah. I
funny
guess
you
people chemistry too in the audience as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny you made me have a squirrel because you were talking about music and making it in different sized rooms. We're in Alabama, right by Muscle Shoals, and the classic Muscle Shoals Studios is reopened for tours and stuff. And we did that tour, and I just had no idea that the Rolling Stones recorded Sticky Fingers there.
Oh
Leonard
no way.
Skinner's first album was done there. I think 4 of Bob Seger's albums were done there. Who else? Oh, Steve Winwood. So they've got Low Spark of
Legends.
High Heeled Boys.
Oh fuck yeah.
Okay, the piano, the Steve Winwood played that is sitting right there.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Do you feel a certain energy in that building too
I
when you go
did.
in? Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
awesome.
did. It was really really weird, and he talked about the guys who ran that studio were called the Swampers, and they actually on I think 2 of Seeger's albums they played all the instruments, and then on both of Steve Winwood's Traffic albums, they were the instrumentalists, and he took them on tour. And these were not touring guys. They were down home Southern guys that just want to work in the studio. And if you watch any video, you'll just see that they're just putting their heads down and playing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was really cool to see what happened there, and there really was an energy. It was
Yeah,
really
yeah.
neat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Even like speaking of energies in the room and to kind of bring it back to comedy, uh handful of years ago, I went out to LA. I filmed for like this battle rap league. They were doing a
Uh-huh.
thing out there. And I had like a day to myself. And instead of like hanging out with the boys or whatever, I'm like, I'm just gonna explore LA. And I went to the Comedy Store
Uh-huh.
and same thing. There was a like I'm almost like thinking about it. I'm getting a little goosebumpy.
Yeah.
There was just a vibe in there. Like in it was almost unexplainable when I've never felt that in anywhere I've seen like a or been in a comedy club or whatever. And I
Yeah.
always hear shit like whether you believe it or not, it's like people say there's haunted and all this fucking crazy stuff happened, but it also just felt like I was like walking in there. It felt like I was in a movie, like it wasn't even reality. And just like I can see why like some of the best kind of get bred out of there, like from open micers to getting their name on the wall, and next thing you know, Netflix specials, HBO, all that. It just had that vibe that was so raw and real and like about it, you know.
And it's funny because in comedy we're talking about the different clubs, and there's certain clubs in the United States that aren't necessarily well known that a lot of comics work their stuff out. And one of them is the Comedy Attic in Bloomington, Indiana. So if you look at the Comedy Attic, who goes there? Mark Maron always does his stuff there first. Stuart Huff always does his stuff there. I think what's the Mulaney? I think Mulaney has done that room quite a few times. And I talked to comedians who either are from Indy or they're from Bloomington, that area, that get to do that room a lot. And they say that room just fosters artistry, and it's a true comedy room. You know how you go to listening rooms for music and stuff like that. It's a true comedy incubator, and that's funny because that's how I felt in Muscle Shoals studio. It's just like the music was there.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that too, because lots of people like who listen to this show, they're into like all different art forms, and maybe they haven't dove so deep into like the comedy world, but a lot of people will see the finished product, the Netflix special, the HBO, whatever it's on, like the final version, and they don't know that these guys are working out their act for like over a year, like almost like a lot of like the big guys do it almost every day, like in LA or New York. They're the Comedy Cellar or all these like the little club you mentioned in Indiana, like just trying shit out. And I even heard my friend, like she saw a Bill Burr set, like he wasn't supposed to be there. He just kind of came in, and she didn't really know that part about like comedy. She just thought people are always on, and he was like, it just seemed like he was unprepared and just fucking around, had like a couple points, and it wasn't like what we expected. Well, I'm like, well, at first you didn't expect to see him, and then like they gotta practice somehow, like you know, like that's the craziest thing about the comedy art form is you don't know what's good until you're in front of an audience. Because like
it's funny because you talk about the Comedy Store. I've talked to a lot of folks that worked when Richard Pryor was doing the Comedy Store, Comedy Store, and he would go on, and this is after he was relatively famous, and he would go on and he would do an hour, and they said it would suck. It was just there was not a laugh in the whole hour. And then he'd come back next week and he'd do it again, and it'd be a little bit funnier, a little bit funnier, a little bit funnier, and then boom, it's on HBO. And but how much work went into it? So he had to write everything, he had to practice it in short form, and then he had to put it all together in an hour, and then he had to keep doing it until it finally got funny.
That's one thing I love about stand-up so much. It's this like and like people who do stand up is it takes almost so much humility to be great in just getting up there. And even after like maybe having a terrible night, like to not quit. It's like, okay, what did we learn from that? It's like always every set's like a lesson, and like how can we shift this? And then it takes time and repetition to morph it into something. And then even to go beyond there, they'll have their act like memorized in their head, and then next thing you know, they get so excellent, like where if somebody yells something out in the crowd, they can like either like counter it or like turn it into their planned act. And it's like it's such a I just talking about it, it's like I'm like, oh, I love comedy so much.
It's total artistry. And the we were talking about the sucking so bad and then getting better. And one of the things that a lot of comedians agree on is the thing you have to do is not be too hard on yourself, and also not be too easy on yourself. So if you have a really great set, that's fine, you can pat yourself on the back one time, but know that that same set just may shit the bed the next
Oh,
time you do it. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so facts. And I feel like the few times or the little handful times I've done it, it taught me a lot about your own personal energy, and what you project is almost what you receive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned how doing the same set, it might work one day and not the other day.
Yeah.
And I remember I did one that crushed, and I did it the next week, and it was just like crickets. And then
Uh-huh.
I was thinking about, like, why didn't that work? I said the same things. And then I thought about my day, and just like, I was all stressed. I was a little tired. I didn't even want to
Uh-huh.
be there, and I just
Yeah.
went through the motions. And people like know when you're just going through the motions and not
Yeah.
totally into that. And
Right. Yeah.
again, it's another like little like tidbit of like comedy that you don't really like maybe see if you are only watching like the Netflix specials and stuff. But
Yeah.
there's so much practice into getting excellent. Like, it's
Yeah.
crazy. Like,
And it's weird because the really great comedians, you can tell that they have made their act in such a way that when you watch it, you think it's the first time they said it.
yeah,
And and
they're in the
and
moment.
yeah, and they, that's an art right there.
Hmm. Do you feel like there's a parallel with podcasting too? It's like, if you're going into an interview, like, this is going to be great, or I'm totally like in the moment, that those are like the better ones.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've walked into them where, I just ran in the door 5 minutes before I was supposed to start recording, and I had a lot of shit on my mind, and they're not as good. And
Yeah, I
and
feel it.
so you have to make sure you make time to do it right. And the same thing for guests. I know you've had shitty guests, because I've had shitty guests, and when they just walk in and you've told them exactly how the podcast works and what you're going to be covering and stuff like that, and they come in and they don't even know who you are and stuff like that. There's
Yeah.
a couple episodes I didn't put out just because I was so pissed off that they weren't prepared. Uh,
Yeah,
they're going to
yeah.
stay in the can forever. But yeah, that's guesting is hard for me because I always want to host.
Yeah, I feel that too. I feel that I've been on a few recently where people are interviewing me, and it's almost like it's a different part of my brain working, and I'm like
Yeah.
trying not to ask the person interviewing me all the
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that today as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
weird.
no, that's
I, I,
awesome.
I always want to take over. And
Yeah.
I was on one. It's called Highbrow Drivel, and the guy is Australian, but he lives in London. And we hit it off because I interviewed him for my show. But he had this hearing expert on. She was basically she's a biologist that works on how sound is transmitted in the brain, how the brain perceives sound, and how you can change that and stuff like that.
Oh, that's
She was
so cool.
Yeah, and she was brilliant. And I was supposed to be funny. I was supposed to be the yuck yuck guy, and I just totally took over the interview because I'm deaf. I'm not totally deaf, but I'm like 50% in one ear, and I don't know,
Oh,
30% in the other. So I wear hearing aids and stuff like that. So I was talking to her about that. But this poor guy, Anthony, that hosts the show, I think he said like 2 words the whole time. And I was not being funny. And I just totally took over, and I'm like, oh, sorry about that.
yeah, that's amazing. I also find like some of my least funnier episodes are when I have comedians on, because I have like such a
Yeah.
safe place to talk about just like life in general, and
Yeah.
like it almost turns into like a mutual like therapy session between like
Yeah.
me and the comedian, and that's what I find like super interesting. And then maybe after they'll send me an email like, oh, I'm sorry I wasn't that funny. I'm like, no, that's cool. Like, this is what it's all
Yeah.
about, like seeing the real side of people and everything.
Yeah. They really, you're so spot on. Comedians, when they're not up on stage and they want to talk, they don't want to be
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, and you probably like from like a fan of the comedian's perspective, it's just like, oh yeah, this, because they only see him on stage, you're like, oh, this guy's probably just funny all the time, but
Yeah.
that's gotta be like always be
Oh, yeah.
expected to be on. It's like,
Yeah.
they've turned being funny into a job, and now I'm
Yeah.
off the clock. I'm gonna
Yep.
I'm gonna talk about what makes me sad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need a hug here. No, but yeah, it's so cool. And like I follow your show now, and I'm gonna have to go back and binge a ton of these episodes because I just I love your vibe, Scott. And I just like from hearing like little snippets of what you talk about too, it's just what I like to intake throughout my day as like I'm binging podcasts and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so many podcasts, so little time. It's
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if you do this, but what I do is I will like binge one podcast for a while, and then I'll put that one away and I'll go to the next one and do that rather than just jump around between things, so that
Mhm.
if I've got a stack of episodes that I know I can dig into, then I'll do it that way.
Yeah, I do something similar too. And it's almost like I have so many different interests. I can't even keep up with all the ones I follow
Oh
and
yeah.
like the people I love and stuff. Even like my friends, like a lot of my friends who are musicians and like comedians too, I'm genuinely like fans of.
Yeah.
And like I can't go to every show every night as well.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
hard to like juggle which one like you're gonna choose. And
Yeah.
but then like you mentioned, I notice I'll get in like a certain flow, like going back to the podcast where I'll just click on one. I'm like, oh, I really like the vibe of these people today. And then it'll
Uh-huh.
turn into like 5 episodes later and
Yeah.
just gotta sink in that energy or whatever it is.
Yeah. And there's really the amount, like you said, the amount of people who do 3 episodes and out is huge. And there are also just a lot of shitty podcasts out there that just don't go anywhere. And I've been a guest on a couple of them. But
Yeah.
those are always there. But there's also a lot of really, really good ones from independent podcasters. And I'm always looking for those. And there's that's what's tough, because there's only 24 hours in a day. And
Yeah.
when you're stuck in the groove of doing your own podcast, it's hard to make time for other podcasts. But yeah,
Mhm.
I do really appreciate some of the really, really good ones that are out there, and like yours.
Oh,
I
I
listened to
appreciate
some
that.
of your episodes when we got acquainted, and I like it.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I like what you're doing too. Mutual fans. I love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so we've talked about the podcast. Where can people find Behind the Bits?
It's on all the apps. Just type in Behind the Bits and you'll see the blue logo with the comedy and tragedy mask, and then you can smash that subscribe button. And
Hell
you can
yeah.
also go to the website and get everything. It's thebtbpc.com. And because Behind the Bits was taken, and it was going to cost me a couple grand to buy it, so there's nothing there. Somebody just owns it. But
Oh
yeah,
shit.
so that's thebtbpc.com. And then I've all my social media you can get through the website.
Awesome. And yeah, like to let people know, every episode of these Creative Imbalance podcasts, they are on our website as well, creativeimbalance.com. And we're going to put links to all of Scott's stuff on there as well. So go around, click them, follow him on everything. And yeah, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. This was such a fun talk.
Yeah, it was really great to meet you for reals. Thanks a lot, Sean.
Thanks once again to Scott Curtis for coming on the podcast. And like we mentioned, his show Behind the Bits, you can listen to it everywhere. I got it on my Spotify. Type it in, Google it, follow it on Instagram, wherever you can, to keep track of when his next episodes are. And I had so much fun talking to him, and hope we can do it again down the road someday. And before we take off, I need to give a special thanks to all you legends out there on the Patreon. Oh my god, I appreciate you so much. First up, a big thanks to the co-producer of the show, Jeremy Hopkin of Hopkin Design, Ola Mazuka of Sonic Fold, Ryan Watkins of Ryan Radio, Amanda McKnight of Top 10 Nerd, Pat Maloney, Ryan Campbell, Daniel Sun, Devin Staple, Mike Ulio, Jenny Potter, Jared Pepper Bronstein, aka Mr. Spicy, oh my god, he's so hot, and Francis Coffer, aka my mom. And if you at home also want a shout out at the end of each and every one of these episodes, and you want to help me out you can go over to patreon.com/the creative imbalance. I believe the lowest tier is only $3, and you get all these episodes early in my unconditional love. And you can probably even hit me up if you need something, need somebody to talk to, you want me to kill a man, just let me know. I'll be there. But you gotta sign up to patreon.com/the creative imbalance. And yeah, and like I mentioned, every cent goes back into the show, and every cent helps. So thank you all. We got a lot of great episodes coming around the corner, and I will catch you next time. Cheers.